For more MTG resources and articles, check out paperchampion.net. This is Tao of Chow with MTG Forge, and today I'm going to talk to you about a deck that I'm calling Artifact Storm. Now, I first encountered this while playing against a user named Nevm, and props to him for thinking of this idea. And I looked it up, and there's actually a couple other people that had similar ideas, and I've modified it significantly, so it's not exactly the same deck, and I think actually it's quite a bit different. So, the basic premise of this deck is that we're going to use Puresteel Paladin. Right, so whenever an equipment enters the battlefield, you may draw a card as a form of card advantage. And then what we do is we play a whole bunch of zero cost artifacts like Bone Saw, and basically use that to draw a whole bunch of cards and just throw a whole bunch of equipments onto the battlefield. Now, once we have that, all the equipments we have cost 0 to equip. Right, so and that doesn't have to equip to Puresteel Paladin; it can equip to anybody. So the idea then is, well, what can you do with a whole bunch of 0 mana artifacts and a Puresteel Paladin? Well, as it turns out, there's quite a bit you can do. So let's get through this. Let's go through this first by looking at the artifacts, and then I'll show you about some of our win conditions. Now, we start off, of course, we must have a 4 of Puresteel Paladins. Alright, so it's a little bit tough to pay its mana cost of 2 whites sometimes, so we have to be playing heavy white in our mana, and I'll show you how we're accomplishing that later. I'm playing a 2 of Lightning Greaves as well, which is our only real equipment that's not 0 cost, but just Lightning Greaves is just so good, and often you can get it out pretty fast, and it helps it really helps to give your opponent or your creature Shroud. Okay, not so much haste, but Shroud for sure. Okay, it can be a little bit problematic, and I'll talk about why it might be problematic later once I go through some of the gameplay here. Okay. So we got Puresteel Paladin and Lightning Greaves. Okay, those are our 2 drops. You can see actually the mana cost is quite low for almost everything here because we run so many 0 drops. Alright, so what we have is 4 of Bone Saw. Equip creature gets +1/+0, equip 1. Alright, Cathar's Shield. Equip creature gets +0/+3, has Vigilance. Okay, equip 3. Kite Shield, basically the exact copy of Cathar's Shield, except we're only running 3 of them, and it's not because of any particular reason, it's just because I don't have that much room in the deck, and I had to get rid of something, so Kite Shield is out. Mox Opal is a 1 of, so Mox Opal is a 0 cost one that will just help us to activate extra mana to get our mana online. Paradise Mantle, same thing, so we can equip this to a creature and then tap that creature for mana, which is nice. Okay, Spidersilk Net, which is +0/+2, and Reach. Alright, so basically we can have a whole bunch of defensive artifacts. Now, the idea is once we have a Puresteel Paladin out, we can play something like a Bone Saw, and that's going to let us draw a card. And because we a third of our deck is these 0 mana artifacts, it's likely that we're going to be drawing even more artifacts and more artifacts. Best case scenario, some really great scenarios, if you have 2 Puresteel Paladins out, and then drawing 2 cards for everyone you're putting out, and you basically draw just tons and tons of stuff. Alright, and even if you don't draw another artifact, you're going to draw one soon. And if not, you're probably drawing one of your other win conditions or a land which you might need. Alright, so that's basically like a ton of card draw and also a whole bunch of artifacts that are really going to help. Alright, so let's get into some of the win conditions. Now, in our main deck, we have a few. The first one is we just straight up equip Puresteel Paladin, and then we can attack with Puresteel Paladin. Now, that's not great because he's subject to removal, so Path to Exile gets rid of him, and a whole bunch of other things can really get rid of him. There's a lot of enchantments, Oblivion Ring can get rid of him, and so on and so forth. So it's not really, he's not really our true win condition, but that's one way we can win. The one that we really want to go for is Goblin Gaveleer. Okay, so Goblin Gaveleer is a common from Mirrodin, and basically it has a 1 mana 1/1, but with trample, and Goblin Gaveleer gets +2/+0 for each equipment attached to it. Now, once we get all Puresteel Paladin out, or if we have one, well then Goblin Gaveleer, we can actually attach all the equipment to him for free. And then his natural ability gives him +2/+0 for each equipment, and all of our equipment then gives him like +3s and +2s and reach and all these other things. So it's basically a form of Bogles where we can use Goblin Gaveleer to just straight up attack our opponent. And the really great thing is that he's got trample. So it's going to be really tough for your opponent to remove him, especially if you can get a Lightning Greaves on him. Now, one of the problems though is that if you do happen to have Lightning Greaves on him, you can't equip anything to him because he has Lightning Greaves. Right? Because he's got Shroud. And Shroud is different from Hexproof, meaning that you can't even target him. Hexproof means only your opponent can't target him. So what you have to do with Shroud is, if you happen to have, you have to have a second creature, take the Lightning Greaves off of him, put it onto, luckily it's an equip 0, put it onto Puresteel Paladin, and then attach a whole bunch of stuff up to Goblin, and then attach the Lightning Greaves back to him. Right? Now, in that interval, when you detach the Lightning Greaves, this is what I was talking about earlier, there's a moment of vulnerability where your opponent can see that you've taken off his Hexproof or his Shroud, and then use a not a Lightning Bolt, but whatever form of removal he has, like a Murder or something like that. All right, so you got to be careful on how you do that when you're unequipping Lightning Greaves. All right. Now, if you notice, most of our equipment is defensive equipment. So it's like +0/+2, +0/+3. This one's also +0/+3, and this is +1/+0. So most of it's defensive. So our opponents our creature's going to have a whole crap ton of defense, but not a lot of power to attack with. Well, what we run is a 2 of Twisted Image, and so what we do is we attack. If our opponent doesn't block, or let's say he does block with something, we can actually switch the target's power and toughness until end of turn and still draw a card off of it. Now, that's not going to be entirely relevant with Goblin Gaveleer, but it certainly is for Puresteel Paladin. Now, that's just one way to win, and anybody who's played Bogles will know that there's a ton of removal for a one creature. There's lots of edicts or whatever that can cause you to sacrifice that creature, and other various forms of attack. So what we can do is, as another win condition, is we can use Aetherflux Reservoir. Now, once we get Aetherflux Reservoir out, what we can do is we can start casting spells, and this is actually an interesting one. So whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn. Now, what that means, though, is it's accumulative. Some people take this to mean okay, so if I cast a spell, I get 1 life. I cast another spell, I get 1 life. Another third spell, I get 1 life. No, it doesn't work that way. When you cast a first spell, you get 1 life. And then when you cast a second spell, you get 2 life. And then for your third spell, you get 3 life. And then for your fourth spell, you get 4 life. And it just keeps building up. Now, when you combine that with Puresteel Paladin, right, then you basically are getting this growth. All right. So, and every time you're drawing another card and drawing another card. So if you have 3 of these out, and then you keep drawing more of these, and you can just basically keep casting them over and over again. Not over and over, but just keep throwing all of this 0 mana stuff. You can actually very easily get up to 50 life, right? And once you're over 50 life, then you can just pay 50 life, deal 50 damage to your opponent, and just straight up win the game. This is actually a lot better if you have Aetherflux Reservoir, a double of them, in which case you don't actually have to cast that many of these 0 mana cost spells to get that out. But failing that, if you only have 1, you can also use a Paradoxical Outcome. So you can return any number of target non-token permanents you control to their owner's hand. So you can actually put out all these 0 mana things, cast this Paradoxical Outcome, then cast them all again, and you're still drawing cards for each one, and then you got your 50 life, and then you can just flat out just kill your opponent by doing 50 damage. Right, so that's the idea behind this deck. Now, you might think, well, how are we going to get these win conditions? Right, well, to be honest, once you have a Puresteel Paladin, you're drawing so many cards that you're almost certainly going to get this. Right, you're going to get one of these, and it's actually a lot more consistent than you might think. Now, some people, well, first I'll go through the mana here. So for the mana, we need some red mana in order to cast Goblin Gaveleer. So we are playing Battlefield Forge. Alright, so it's not the best one, but it allows us mainly it allows us to get red and white at will, and it's pretty cheap. So that's a nice one to have in there. Glacial Fortress is nice because it's likely we're going to have a plains or an island in hand, because we've got some plains and islands and also some Hallowed Fountains. And the other choice, Seachrome Coast, is just as likely to come in tapped. So, and also Seachrome Coast is way more expensive. So I really like Glacial Fortress in this deck. Now, Glimmervoid is a super expensive card. But you can't, basically we're going to have so many artifacts in hand that this is almost never going to be sacrificed, and adding 1 mana of any color just really helps quite a bit. Alright, another one, Hallowed Fountain, just producing our blue and white mana together, and also being able to pay just straight up islands and plains. Alright, so that's actually our entire mana base. Now, in the sideboard, we've got 2 of Leyline of Sanctity. That's just, I just always like to have Leyline of Sanctity in my sideboard, but again, it could be really anything. A negate, 3 negates, just in case people are trying, your opponent's trying to counter a lot of stuff. Like, so you put out Puresteel Paladin, and then they're trying to counter your Puresteel Paladin. You can use negate to counter their counters, or other things like that. Retract. Now, I'll talk about these two in just a second. Ensnaring Bridge is to protect us against other creatures. Now, once you win a game with Goblin Gaveleer, for instance, or Aetherflux Reservoir, it's likely that your opponent is going to realize what you're doing, and they're going to kill your Gaveleer as soon as he comes out, right? Or they're going to sideboard in some artifact destruction, and they're going to want to kill your Aetherflux Reservoir. Okay, now your negates can actually help you with that. But you also have the option of switching your deck over to a storm type of deck. So the idea is that, again, you get a Puresteel Paladin, or even, you might not even need it, right? So you get a Puresteel Paladin, you draw, you start playing these with 0 mana cost cards, okay? Then you retract them. So return all artifacts you control to their owner's hand, right, for 1 mana. So you retract them all, play them all over again, and you can easily get out like 10 or 15 of these, right? And then you Grapeshot your opponent. So 1 damage to target creature or player with Storm. Alright, so you can switch over from being more of a Bogles deck to being more of a Storm deck, which your opponents might not expect. Now, this type of build is what I like to refer to as just basically an all-in build. We don't have much in the way of defenses. We don't have a lot of removal or anything like that. We're just hoping that our opponent doesn't come too fast, and we can just basically one-shot them in turn 4 or 3. Right? So that's basically how the entire deck works. Now, a couple things, like I said, got to make sure that Lightning Greaves can be kind of, has to be, if you're going to equip it to your Goblin Gaveleer, you've got to have another creature, so you can take it off and put it somewhere else while you equip other things to it. Alright, other than that, I just want to mention that this deck is pretty expensive. There's a lot of money cards in here, but there are some ways you can actually lower the price of these. So, for instance, the Ensnaring Bridges are pretty expensive, and you can easily just replace them with something like a Ghostly Prison, which would be just as good, and that would basically delay your opponent long enough for you to still win out the game. Leyline of Sanctity you could also replace with basically anything else, like Path to Exile would be a good include, or Ivory Mask would actually be a good include as well, and those ones are much less expensive. You can't get away from Puresteel Paladin. That's just a great card. Lightning Greaves you could take out and just put in 2 other 0 mana artifacts. There are some good ones, like, I forget one, there's like a XX cost where you can just cast it for 0 and it just sits on the battlefield. It doesn't do anything, but it's just an artifact to have for 0. Let's see, what else is expensive? Mox Opal is pretty expensive, and you can actually take it out and just put in the 4th Kite Shield, and basically it hurts your mana a little bit, but you're not really, it's not going to kill you to take it out. Let's see, Glimmervoids can come out and be replaced with something like a City of Brass. Now, Glimmervoids cost like, I don't know how much they are now, like $30 to $40 each right now. City of Brass is like maybe $5 or $6 each. So it's, you know, a much cheaper option to do City of Brass. But then City of Brass also does damage to you in order to get any of its colored mana out. So, you know, do with it what you will. And then Hallowed Fountain can be replaced with just straight up islands or plains. I wouldn't recommend replacing with a Seachrome Coast necessarily, because one thing is that we really want a Glacial Fortress to come in untapped, and if you replace Hallowed Fountain, then you're taking out plains and islands, and so you should maybe replace it with plains and islands as well, but your decision. So when I replaced all the high value cards with what I suggested, I could get the cost of the deck to be, you know, somewhere around $100 in paper, and much less obviously electronically. Alright, so anyways, there's some ideas on how you can run this deck. Anyways, there's one last thing I wanted to talk about. Some people suggested a card, or like in other builds, they run a card called Riddlesmith, and I tested it with Riddlesmith. But Riddlesmith really didn't work like I thought it might. I thought it would actually be a pretty good card, like an extra set of Puresteel Paladins, but whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. And basically being a looting effect made it really difficult for me to actually keep the cards I wanted. So for instance, I would play eventually you're going to get down to 0 cards in your hand. You're going to play or 1 card, and it's going to be one of your 0 mana artifacts. You're going to play that, and then you get another 0 mana artifact from the draw, but then you got to discard it. So that really didn't help that much. I found that he tended to stall out pretty quick and just really wasn't worth it. And what I found is I could generally win just from Goblin Gaveleer and Aetherflux Reservoir, and then in the next turn switching over to a Retract / Grapeshot Storm type build. Right, so anyways, that's the deck I have for this week, and I think it's actually pretty interesting and pretty fun. It's a very clever way of winning the deck, and it has multiple win capabilities. So anyways, I hope you do like it. Remember, if you do like these videos, to like and subscribe to the channel, and if you do have suggestions, throw them into the comment box. I'm always interested in hearing what you have to say. Stay tuned for extra gameplay videos coming up in this week, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. It's that time again for a random card review. Let's check out a random card and see what we think. So Slithermuse. Alright, so Slithermuse is a Morningtide card. 4 mana, so 2 of anything and 2 blue for a 3/3. So when Slithermuse leaves the battlefield, choose an opponent. If that player has more cards in hand than you, draw cards equal to the difference. Okay, and you can evoke this, so you can cast a spell for its evoke cost. If you sacrifice it, so you can basically just use it like as a one-off there. Alright, so I don't know, like a 3/3 for 4 isn't bad, but when he leaves play, choose an opponent. I guess this might be good actually in multiplayer. Maybe better in multiplayer than in one-on-one games, because what you could do is you could actually just throw them in, choose one of the players around the table, and then draw cards back up to that many. And a good thing is that you'd actually be able to blink him. So it might go into like a blue-white blink deck or something like that, because what it says is when he leaves play, not when he dies or goes to the graveyard or anything like that. So if there's like a blink effect that you have, you can actually blink him and basically refill your hand. And, if assuming one of your opponents has a full hand. So I think overall it's not a terrible card. I would agree with the 3, maybe give it a 3.5 rating, depending on the deck. If you really built a deck around it, like it could go really well in a commander deck or something like that. One-on-one, I wouldn't say it's a wonderful card, but overall it's not too bad. So like I said, 3.5 stars. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you think differently, let me know. Or if you know like a great place to run this, then let everyone else know too. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.